Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to another Nacho Tuesday. Today I have Jeremy Crane with Retrievables, and I'd love if we can get started off with him introducing his company and what they do.
So Retrievables is a marketplace where we connect businesses that are owed money or holding delinquent accounts receivable to law firms that specialize in collections. So basically, companies that have money that's owed to them, they can come onto our platform, enter all the information about their delinquent debt, and then we have a network of law firms that can view and assess those cases and ultimately decide to connect with those businesses and help them out with their collections needs.
That's great. We know marketplace is all too well over here. So have you seen like an uptake in the amount of people needing collection services? I mean, given the economic situation, or is it usual?
It's tough to tell if it's the economy or if it's our business growing.
Mhm.
And I think
That's a good problem to have.
I think it's some sort of combination of both, but the economy definitely presents a landscape for a bigger need for collections than there was maybe 3 years ago.
Definitely.
Yeah.
So how'd you get into this? Would love to learn a little bit more about your background and how'd you get into collections and where did this all start?
Well, I hate to use this term, but there's no better term for it. I'm a serial entrepreneur, and my first venture was actually a used furniture business in college that I started.
Yeah.
Prior to Retrievables, I had a company, Stadium Park, which was an app for stadium, arena, and event parking payments, which sounds more exciting than Retrievables, but I don't know. Collections is actually just, I think, more suitable for me. The way that I got into legal collections is that I was working at a collections law firm doing marketing and business development. And there I came to understand that small and medium-sized businesses and lenders are oftentimes not that efficient at collecting money.
Mhm.
And sometimes they don't even try to collect it at all.
Yeah.
I also came to understand the best way to collect money is by employing the collection law firm. And it's a very underutilized field and not very known.
Yeah.
So I decided that I wanted to kind of bring this solution to the masses and SMBs throughout the United States and actually throughout the world so that they can have an easy access to collections law or the best way to collect money.
Yep, that's a great point. A lot of companies probably assume that it's really expensive to retain a lawyer. But a lot of these probably do they work on like a commission basis? Like they'll take a percentage of the funds that they acquire?
Almost always. Yeah. Almost all of the collection law firms we work with, they work on a contingency fee basis.
Yeah, that's important for a company to be able to keep your money coming in. Otherwise, you can't grow, right?
I mean, it takes the risk away from the company and more onto the law firm, but really it creates a partnership between each law firm and every single one of their clients.
Yeah, nobody likes to be the bad cop either, right? You can outsource that to somebody else.
Right.
Great. So I guess, as far as like actually getting paid, which is important for growing your company, but what other financial tips would you offer for entrepreneurs looking to grow their business, step by step and keep their cash flow looking right?
Yeah. So in terms of like cash flow and collections, I always think try to make it easy to pay for your customers. Optimally, ACH is number one, then credit card, but accept checks if you need to. But you try to minimize that, but that really goes into just make it easy for people to pay. Another thing is to like really define and be clear about what your collections policies and methods are, so companies know what to expect. I would say really the biggest thing though is establishing in-house processes. So understanding, when payments are late, when you're going to reach out, who are the people in the organization that are responsible to reach out. And there's actually a lot of businesses that have like that do accounts receivable management, where they'll help to facilitate these types of activities. Now, after all that, there's always going to be people that don't pay.
Yep.
And that's kind of where we come in. And it's really important to have a solution when a business has stalled out in their in-house collection efforts to be able to collect that money. And as I said, employing the use of a collections law firm is the best way to do it. And Retrievables is here to help people find those attorneys. So,
is there a good balance that you would recommend in terms of, how much you keep in accounts receivables, so you don't get overextend yourself, right? Is it like an 80-20 rule, or what would you recommend for businesses to ensure that they don't have too many, payments due outstanding that they need to collect on, where it drastically affects the cash flow for their business and puts them in a bad spot?
Well, I'm not sure exactly what that number is, and it kind of varies from industry to industry. So, for example, if you're talking about SaaS companies, like you guys have a lot on your platform, it should be pretty minimal, because SaaS companies are often paid by month on a credit card that's held, or a bank account that's held. And then if you're, let's say, a construction company or a distributor, manufacturer, those types of businesses might have 30% outstanding at a time, and it's more of a constant effort to do that. So it really depends on the industry, what percentage you're likely to see. Best is 0.
Yep. So what tips would you offer, say, for startups to acquire some of their first initial sales and revenue? Since you're a serial entrepreneur, how do you kind of go about that, aligning product market fit and getting your first customers in the door?
Well, I think there's a lot of persistence and passion that has to go into it. And oftentimes, or almost always, it's the founder of the company that's going out and getting those initial customers. When you're getting your first one, you really have to convince people to trust you, trust your company, and to trust the mission. Thinking back on when I do remember the first customer that we had, of course, thinking back on, and the first attorney that we had, thinking back on it, at that point, I was making over 100 cold calls per day, in addition to everything else that I have to do as a founder, and also to be really creative, reaching out to every single small business owner that I was connected on LinkedIn. For me, looking at the sides of trucks and calling the numbers of businesses on the sides of trucks. And actually, we still do it sometimes. One other thing we did too, we started our business in Massachusetts. And we joined these small chambers of commerce, like in the middle of nowhere in Massachusetts, to try to make relationships and get customers. So I would say to really be determined, and also creative, in low cost ways to, and you'll do it. You'll get there if you're determined enough to do so. So
yeah, as we always say at NachoNacho, we like to be everywhere all the time. So it's one of our mottos. And our friend Coco at Nimbler, it's a sales lead generation platform. They have a bunch of great contact information for B2B sellers. But so what he recommends too is cold calling as well. He says, because a lot of people don't do it right now, but if you just pick up the phone and call somebody, it comes across ironically as a lot more authentic than, everybody's just sending these cold emails these days, which, if everybody else is doing it, then people learn to kind of ignore it because it gets overwhelming at some point.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. I think cold calls are very effective, and they're very hard.
Yeah.
In my career in life, how many cold calls have I made? I don't know if it's between 10,000 and 100,000. And still, every time it's hard. I have to take a deep breath and say, okay, here we go.
Yeah.
But it works, and especially with small businesses and some of our target audiences. Now, we do a lot of cold calls still, and I'm not the one doing them. But yesterday, I think I did 20 or something like that. So.
Yeah, once it's in your system, you can't really let it go. You're like, there's a number. I have to cold call it.
Yeah, and I actually did maybe a few this morning also. So.
Yeah, that's why I don't go outside anymore. Just kidding. I see phone numbers and I start calling them.
Yeah, exactly.
Great. So I guess what other tips do you offer for SaaS companies maybe to manage their cash flow better? Any other ideas around that? How they could grow their business brick by brick, dollar by dollar?
Yeah, yeah. I think with SaaS companies specifically, and I sort of hit on this before, but really, if you can have recurring payments on ACH and credit cards, another thing that I think that SaaS companies deal with is like renewals and contracts, and that's oftentimes where they can get into disputes
Mhm.
with companies. I think that you really have to, um, be upfront and reach out to your customers prior to that renewal date to make sure that they're satisfied. In some cases, you can add on services too, which is really great. But I don't know. For example, like we were like up for a renewal on HubSpot, and they reached out to us like with plenty of time to like discuss our plan and see what we're using and what we weren't. And I really thought that was great. And then the other thing that they did that I think SaaS companies can do is to really like work with those companies, understand their needs, understand what their budget limitations are, and really just make sure that they stay on as a customer and that their credit card is still attached and they're getting billed every month. So um, that specifically SaaS, that's what I would kind of have to mention about it.
Yeah, and it's very, I've seen the best approach is very consultative, right? So, like you said, you're reaching out to them to, check on the service, ensure that everything's working properly, that, all their questions are answered, their needs are met. That is some of the most effective way to sell actually, because a lot of times, like you mentioned, a lot of customers might actually, first of all, they'll like the customer service and the attention to give them. Second of all, they might realize that you have other features and upgrades that they might potentially want. So
Yeah,
it does turn into a potential consultative sale where you could actually upgrade them and bring them up to a higher subscription level.
yeah, yeah. So it works on both ends there.
Yep. So a lot of startups are attracted to the big deals up front, getting that whale client early. What are your thoughts on that? I mean, obviously there could be some risks relying too much on one particular customer in the early stage of your company. Heck, even later, I see a lot of companies that have a lot of their business consolidated with one vendor, and if that goes away, a lot of their business disappears overnight. What tips would you recommend for businesses to mitigate that risk?
Yeah, well, I mean, first of all, you should never have one buyer and one supplier. There are
Yeah.
businesses that ride all on one large government contract that they have to bid on every 10 years. I don't know how valuable those businesses are,
Yeah.
but in the early stages, as far as trying to get larger customers, I think that you have to focus on the core of your business and those smaller ones, and I guess lower hanging fruit. But
Mhm.
as you're doing that, I think that it's really smart to also pursue larger companies. The sales cycle is typically a lot longer. As you get into those discussions, you then begin to understand what are the needs of these larger companies, and to be able to react quickly in order to make your product or service one that's attractive to them and works for those
Yeah.
larger clients. I was just thinking about Microsoft, for example,
Yeah.
and they were a very, very early company when they made a partnership with IBM. And you have to imagine that at that time, they didn't have all of their ducks in a row, but they were confident that they were going to make it happen really quick. And, we're not Microsoft, but we actually have had some pretty large law firms very early on, and large businesses to trust us. And I think you just have to really learn and move along with them, and fulfill their needs while you're getting those smaller customers to build up and sustain your business as well.
Yep. Yeah, diversity is key there, but yeah, a big company can, change things overnight for the growth prospects of your company. Uh,
Right.
so when you're setting up those deals, do you have any tips on how to structure the agreement? Just kind of protect your downside risk. Say if you are the Microsoft partnering with IBM in the early days, which is great for your business, but if it falls through, it could potentially put you in a bad place.
Well, I think that you need to protect yourself by having all of those smaller clients and not ride on just one potential opportunity, but have two potential opportunities like that, but even more so 5 or 10, so that you're not sitting around waiting. This person didn't get back to me,
Mhm.
so that it's not something that means as much to you because you have so many irons in the fire. And that's really what it's about, is having a lot of irons in the fire. And then, in terms of like negotiating and making a deal with these larger organizations, any negotiation or deal has to be something that works for both sides, and bottom line fair. And that's what I always target.
Great. I guess what are some other common operational mistakes that startup founders make, especially in the early days of their company, that they could
Um,
avoid?
I think that like hiring is a big thing. I think that startup founders, they hire too quick and not very carefully. I think that it wastes a lot of money, a lot of time, and a lot of times people are hired that aren't necessarily needed in an organization at that time. So I think it's to be really careful about hiring people. I think I've seen startup founders losing focus and not having a clear plan. Things change in startups all the time, and sometimes you have to pivot and test new ideas, but you always have to like come back to the ground and say, what is our mission and what are we trying to do here, to not lose focus too much. So I think that those two things
Mhm.
are really like critical, and you see people making those mistakes. Oftentimes, also another thing can be that the founder will take on too much themselves.
Yeah,
It's kind of like a real,
delegation key.
there's a shift when it's like, let's say it's just you or just two founders doing everything, and then you start to build a team, and you really have to be able to pass things off and trust those people that you hired, especially if it's
Yep.
the correct hire and a necessary one. But I think that can be a challenge for founders.
Yeah, a lot of times because, it's their baby and they love it, more than anybody. So it's kind of hard to, be able to trust and let that go. But that all comes back to the hiring practice, right? If you get the right people that you can trust, delegation is a key to leadership. You have to be able to
Yes, yeah,
delegate tasks and rely
yeah.
on these people to pull it off. Um, and then that was another good point too you made about the shiny object syndrome, I guess we'll call it, where it's easy to, here maybe one customer wants a specific feature, but it doesn't necessarily align with your vision. So if you keep your vision clear for your product and your business, you could always make decisions along that parallel that and add to the overall value of the company. But it's easy to get distracted in the near term by like one customer trying to win over wants a specific feature, and there's another customer that wants another specific feature, but it doesn't serve the broad vision of your company. It's easy to chase those shiny objects, especially when it comes to acquiring revenue, where you could just completely lose the focus and vision of your company, which is that core base that you're building that applies to the core of your ICP that you're trying to grow your business with instead of one particular customer.
Right, and that's what I sort of meant by like staying on the keeping your feet on the ground and also standing your ground,
Mhm.
in that you do want to be flexible for your customers, and provide to them what they need, but at the same time sometimes you have to say like, this is how we do our business,
Yeah,
and that's important too.
great
So
point. And as far as hiring, what do you look for, I guess, in early stage employees? I believe there's a difference between people that might be a better fit and a large corporation that are very process driven, that kind of plug into the cog, I guess, in the wheel, so to speak. But there's a different type for startups too, right? They have to, in my opinion, wear a lot of hats. They have to be flexible to change, fast, quick moving environments. What are your thoughts on the traits that you look for when hiring startup people specifically?
yeah, I think that first of all it's important to hire somebody that has experience in the role, of course, but Equally as important, I think, is someone that has experience in working in the same stage of business that you're in.
Great point.
So they really understand, and we're, pretty early stage. And I think it's really important to have someone that understands what that's like.
Yeah.
But I would say the key thing is to hire somebody that's motivated by the growth of the company and wants to be a part of something that's on the relative ground floor and be a critical asset in growing that. And I think that's easily comes over in an interview with someone that's what they see in themselves and what they want in their role. And that's really what I would look at number one.
Mhm. That's a great point. Yeah, because if people if people are excited about the problem that they're solving or the mission, they'll kind of motivate themselves. And you're right, that does come out in interviews. You could always, you know, anybody's always willing to work for money, but it's something entirely different to find somebody that's really motivated by the mission and
Right,
finds a purpose in the work that they're doing.
right.
Great point. So, in terms of, I guess failure. I mean, as an entrepreneur, we go through this so many times. Do you have any great lessons on failure, and what did you learn from those?
Well, I don't really believe in failure. I think it's how you frame it in your mind.
Yep.
And, outcomes are kind of based on decisions that are made. And if you're making sound decisions and calculated decisions with not too much emotions involved, then you can't consider something an outcome to be a failure. However, you do learn a lot of things along the way. And some of the things that I would say I've learned would be to be honest with everyone
Mhm.
and be true to yourself, be an expert in your field and what you're doing. And you also have to work really hard too.
Yep.
That part's unavoidable. So,
Yep. Yeah. A lot of people don't realize what they're signing up for when they become an entrepreneur. What? I have to work 10, 12, 13, 14 hours a day?
well, I think it's fun. So,
Yeah. Exactly. Right. So if you love what you do, you never work a day in your life. Right.
yeah,
So,
that's what they say. It's true.
yeah.
So,
Yeah, I mean, I've always worked crazy hours. I mean, I don't do like I used to. I used to do like 100 hours a week, but I'm 38 now. I can't really do that, but I still put in a ton of hours. But hey, I love doing stuff like this, right? So, is this really work?
at some point, you have to sleep.
Yep. I always do make sure I get my 7 hours of sleep per night.
Yeah, yeah. At some point, you got to sleep.
Yeah, if you get your sleep, you drink your water, and get your basics done, it keeps yourself in kind of a good space. So when
Yeah,
you are working, you're actually like focused and you actually have the energy to do so.
that's right. Yeah.
Great. So, I guess what kind of challenges did you face as a company early on, and how did you overcome those? You kind of walked me through it a little bit earlier.
Yeah, so there's really two that I can think of, and one is a challenge that I'm sure that you have as well, is being a marketplace.
Mhm.
No matter what marketplace you are, you have two sides, and you're always trying to grow and populate the supply and the demand. And a lot of the times, or what we've been challenged with, is one side of the marketplace outpacing the other. So
Yeah.
at the beginning of the company, when we had just started, we had more attorneys than we had actual business. And, that presented the challenge of, the attorneys not being able to get enough value out of the marketplace. So
Yeah.
what did we do with that? A lot more cold calls. We started to really understand marketing, especially like Google ads and how to drive more traffic there. It's really growing like every day. Today was a big day for us actually with
Yeah.
with new business coming in onto the platform. And then, at some point the amount of business that we had outpaced the amount of attorneys that we had. So then you have
That's
to come up with ideas on how to get more attorneys and the
more
attorneys.
cold calls.
What?
More cold calls.
Yeah, and actually the attorney outreach, that's my job.
Yeah.
Or it's one of my jobs. So I've done a lot of work in, making connections. It's a tight-knit industry. I started to go to conferences, which has been really helpful. And getting a lot of introductions, and that kind of has helped a lot to grow the attorney side of the marketplace. So it's in a good place now, but it's just always something that the marketplace struggles with. The other thing is fundraising. I mean, fundraising is just hard. I had been working almost a year on the business with my personal investment of $2,500.
I like it. You're frugal.
That was just what I had. So it it makes you learn how to be really lean, but it also restricts you from doing a lot of things that you need in the business. And to overcome that is really just to like focus on making the best out of what you have, and really going out and getting that early traction. And that's kind of like what you need in order to get those early investors. And ultimately, we were able to. We started at an accelerator in St. Louis, and along with that, we raised like an initial funding round of $200,000, and that really helped us to get off the ground, to really enter the market, I would say. And shortly after that, we raised another $800,000. So I think really the challenge of fundraising is the solution is to put your head down on growth, and also there's a lot of cold calls and outreach that are and connecting with people and meeting people that go along with that. But I would say those two things.
Yeah, especially for investors too. They like a more personal touch. So you don't just throw them up into an email campaign
Yeah.
and hope for the best. Personal introductions, heck, sometimes even giving them a cold call works,
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, and that's a great point that you made about, kind of growing the company brick by brick. And I think companies that, I've seen companies raise a bunch of money and they're, easily blow it because, they haven't focused on product market fit and really, focusing on the levers to grow the company. They get too relaxed on just throwing money at the problem, maybe spending a bunch of money on advertising as an example. But if you start a company, even if you have the money, it's good to kind of, really test that lean model early and often to try to, get product market fit, by yourself without having a bunch of money, because money could always scale a solution. If you have great product market fit, you know your customer and you know how to sell, money just adds fuel to the fire. But if you don't have that fire in place in the first place, adding money to it's not going to go anywhere.
And you got to keep the fire going too.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
you got to feed the fire. Yeah.
Yeah, and I've seen a lot of startups, unfortunately, just think, hey, if I just raise a bunch of money, millions of dollars, it'd fix all my problems. But, unfortunately, that's not the case.
Yeah, you're right.
Yeah, and it's a tough fundraising environment too. So kudos for you guys for raising. But I think it's finally starting to pick back up a little bit, which is good for startups, of course.
Yeah.
So what's I guess one potential thing that a customer should know about Retrievables and why they should pick your service over another?
Well, there's really no one else out there like us that's
You're the first I've heard of, to be honest.
yeah, I mean, there aren't any startups that are focusing on B2B legal collections. And we're trying to be the source for that. We've really made a reputation in the industry of legal collections, and now a lot of people are coming to us for their collections. And what I would say why they should come to us is that collecting money utilizing a collection attorney is the best way. I mentioned it a few times, but that's for sure. And also we make it really easy to find them. Typically they're not easy to find. They really aren't easy to find. And we have a great network of attorneys that are connecting with businesses. So it's like, find the best way to collect money in the easiest possible way, then that's what Retrievables does. So that's it.
Call the experts. Yeah, that's a great point too, because a lot of people don't know where to look for help, and then two, if they do see something on Google, for instance, they don't know if it's a reputable firm. But you guys probably have like reviews and ratings and vetted attorneys, so it's safer to go through you guys through vetted attorneys that actually have a track record for being able to do this stuff.
Absolutely.
That's great. Well, Jeremy, I really appreciate you coming on today. Fellow New Yorker here. But anybody interested in the service, please check it out today in the B2B SaaS marketplace, SaaS and services marketplace now. NachoNacho is the best place to buy SaaS and services. Thank you so much, Jeremy, for coming on, and we'll stay in touch.
My pleasure.
Take care.